Hey Mike, let's talk about your job. What do you do?
I'm the Director of Emergency Management for the City of Enid and for Garfield County. I have been the county guy for 27 years, and I've been the city guy for 18. And it's been a real trip.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I'm one of those few people that really enjoy their jobs. You know, I mean, I'm doing something and getting paid for it that I really enjoy. And as old as I am right now, I'm not even looking to retire until I absolutely have to.
That's great.
So,
tell us a little bit about what your job entails.
Well, my job is basically to prepare for, respond to, mitigate, and recover from emergencies and disasters. That's what my job is, to be that go-between person between emergency services and Gerald, for instance, to keep him informed of what's going on, what resources we would need, and that kind of thing in the event something really catastrophic occurred.
We have an app that we use to be able to get information out. What is the name of that app?
Our app is Garfield County EM, and it is loaded with preparedness information, and there's a lot of places in the app for you to put your personal information in the event, let's just say we had a tornado or something and it wiped out your house and this kind of thing. If you have your phone and it didn't get destroyed, then a lot of your personal information would be in there. And for instance, if you did get hurt, then emergency services would have access to that and be able to take care of you. It's pretty neat.
We know you for the weather, but is there more that you do?
Oh yeah, there's a whole lot more. You know, weather is a part of what I do, but if you had to put it on a percentage scale, it's probably like 10%. You know, even though that seems to be the majority of what I do. But, you know, the preparedness, the response, the mitigation, and the recovery part are areas that I have to be very versed in. Because if the worst happens, you know, that's what is going to be foremost going on, you know, with me in coordinating, getting resources in from local here and, you know, the surrounding area, along with state and, if necessary, federal, you know, resources and stuff in here too. So, but preparedness is really the biggest thing. And I think that if I had to pick one thing under preparedness, that I would look at the folks out there and what they really need, and that's insurance. Insurance is very, very, very important. Some people think that state emergency management or FEMA will take care of them after a disaster. It's not true. It's up to you to take care of you. You know, it could be upwards of a week if we had a catastrophic event here till we could even get outside resources in here, depending what it is. Your insurance will take care of you, hopefully, you know, if you got the right coverage. It take care of your house if you're in an apartment and you have an apartment insurance or whatever exactly they call that. That'll be a real big thing for you. The only part of the insurance thing that most likely FEMA, if it got that big, would take care of is help you with your deductible. Everything else is on your insurance. And if you don't have insurance, FEMA could maybe help along that line, but every case is different. What they do for you will be different than what they would do for me, for instance. So even though we may have the same insurance, it'll still be different depending on what our needs are.
But you're also a firefighter.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. I've been on the Hillsdale Carrier Fire District. It's a county department for 18 years also. I got on that department shortly after I came to work for the city. And I'm now, as of 3 years ago, the fire chief. So that's been a real interesting ride too.
So on the same note of weather and emergency crews such as fire and police, you had stated that our police and our firefighters are also weather.
We utilize emergency services for our spotters. All the rural fire departments have individuals within their departments that are our storm spotters. They come to training every year and they maintain, you know, their credentials, so to speak. We implemented Enid Police into the group about 5 years ago. And that's been very important to have Enid Police helping us along the line, because once storms come into Enid, we really had nobody in the past other than our people to, you know, try to zoom across town, and that's a nightmare. If if anybody is familiar with Enid traffic. So Enid police help us out immensely along that line. And then, of course, out in the county and in town too, Garfield County Sheriff's deputies help us too. And we utilize emergency services folks simply because we can all talk to each other. It's very important. You know, we're doing this interview here in the operations room, and when we do have severe weather events and this kind of thing, then we have sheriff's deputies in here, some Enid police officers are in here to help, and now we're going to be implementing some 911 off-duty dispatchers if, you know, for communications and stuff in here, because it gets very overwhelming for me in here trying to do the radar thing, talk on the radio, try to keep up on social media, which once we get people in the field, I don't pay much attention to social media unless I have help. If I have help in here, then we'll put out as much as we can on social media. And I guess I've spoiled a lot of people by putting out the advisories on social media and let people know what's going on and what things look like, and then they don't hear anything else after that. But they don't understand that once we go operational, then my priority is to our people in the field, because they're in a dangerous situation and I have to be on top of that with them, you know, with radar backup and that kind of thing.
You're kind of a one-man show most of the time, unless you have to have spotters in the field. Would you say that's accurate?
That's very accurate. I'm a one-man operation on the city side and the county side. So, but again, I do have help, especially when I need it the most. There are some times where, just like the last event that we had here with the wind event that happened along Norman Road and the tornado warnings that were all around, I had elected that particular day to do operations at home, simply because of the tornado threat and the wind threat. I figured with 100-mile-an-hour winds forecast and the tornado threat, I've got a storm cellar at home. We don't have one out here. And so I elected to do that at home, and it got crazy real quick. And I kind of regretted that to a point, but after talking with the police and sheriff's folks, I told them, I said, we're going to do that out here from now on, irregardless of what the threats are, just because it's just better to have the extra help when you're under that kind of duress. And believe me, there's a lot of that going on when you're trying to do everything all at one time by yourself.
So you had mentioned preparedness.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, preparedness is getting ready for something. You know, people say preparedness is hard. Well, you prepare to go to work, you prepare to go to school, you come to work, you're preparing for meetings and this kind of thing. It's really not any different preparing for an event that may not, or that could, I guess, happen. For instance, when you leave the house in the mornings, you don't expect to have an accident. But what if? It all falls under preparedness. And if you at least have an idea, okay, if I have a wreck and nobody's hurt, what am I going to do? What steps am I going to take? You know, besides calling a spouse or calling a parent or whatever, you know. And then, of course, police will come. If you're hurt, ambulance will come, fire will come, that kind of thing. So, you know, what are you going to do? What if something happens at your house? What's your plan, so to speak, if your house catches on fire? What if the wind blows your fence down? You know, what if something happens and a jet crashes near you or something like that, heaven forbid, and blows the windows out of your house? You know, do you have an idea of what you might do? That's preparedness. You know, just what if this happens? What if that happens? What am I going to do? And that's the mindset everybody needs to be in, because you just never know. Just like when I get called out on a response of some kind, on my way out there, I'm thinking, okay, what if it's this? What if it's that? Or whatever, you know. I'm trying to think ahead of time what I'm going to do, what decisions I'm going to make. Is my role when I get there going to be an incident command, or is it going to be as a firefighter? You know, that kind of thing. You just don't know till you get there. And so when other resources are arriving, if I have to take on the role of firefighter out there, initially, which happens a lot to us chiefs out there in the rural community, then when more people show up and get out there, then I can step back from that and get back into the incident command structure to oversee what's going on, and then, you know, help make decisions on what other resources, where we need to go, and that kind of thing.
In previous conversations, you said that you actually have a preparedness manual or a preparedness instruction
Yeah, it's our emergency operation plan. And what's really unique about that, it's about 225 pages, give or take. When I first got into this position, the thing was about that thick, okay, over 500 pages. And who is going to read that book if anything goes awry? That's where I come in. We can take steps in there and abbreviate things depending on what's going on. We have a protocol for everything we do. If there's a traffic accident, our response is always going to be the same. If there's a fire, our response is always the same. No matter what the emergency is, our response is always the same. What we do when we get there dictates what the situation is. So fire, police, us, the city, the county, we all have that plan on what we're supposed to do. But when I rewrote that plan, I wrote it in a way that gives us latitude on what we have to do, because technically a plan is something you have to follow by the book, so to speak. And when you don't go into detail as to how you're going to do this or how you're going to do that, that gives you that latitude to do stuff within the statement, so to speak, that allows you to get the job done.
Do you have a preparedness manual for the residents?
Yes, we do. We have a preparedness guide. Back, years ago, the state had what they called the McReady program, and it was basically a program that put flyers out for people and all sorts of information, disaster information, preparedness information. And when that program ended, I took about 3 months and rewrote that guide. And that's what our preparedness plan is today. It's a guide that everybody, in my opinion, should have. And on the website, they can actually download that to their computer, and they could actually print it off if they want to, too.
You had spoken about response. Can you elaborate more on that?
Okay, well, response, like I was saying before, when we get a call, we respond to a situation. And, again, it just kind of depends what we do on scene based on what's happened. I give the analogy that no two fires are the same, no two accidents are the same, no two wind events are the same, other than there's a lot of damage. And so when we respond the same with whatever resources we think is required. And then when we get there, we make decisions on how we need to go about taking care of that particular situation.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by mitigate?
Okay, this will be one that the older folks here in town can understand a lot more, because I'm going to use the flood of '73 as an example. When you're mitigating a problem, and I'm going to use the flood that we had that kind of did a lot of damage out there in Brookside, and in that particular event, 13 souls were lost. It's just unfortunate, very unfortunate that happened. But back in that day, the channels here in Enid, all the little streams and stuff that we have and the drainage areas were not very big. Okay, they were small. Therefore, we had a lot of flooding here in town. Mitigation is understanding you have a problem and you fix it. So what do we have now? We have wider channels to handle more water without the overflow, depending on the storm. And so even down through Brookside, that channel has been made a lot wider. But we still will have a problem with backup if the stream downstream isn't widened also. Because if it narrows up, that water is going to overflow down in there and cause flooding, way on downstream. That's basically mitigation.
Tell me more about recovery.
Okay. Depending on what happens, there's always a protocol that you have to go through to get through the recovery process. Like I was stating before in the preparedness part of this, insurance helps there, okay? You get your insurance agent out there, they get their evaluators out there or whatever, and they assess the damage and that kind of thing, and then they help you get the right people out there to get stuff taken care of, to bring, the damage back. You want to recover back from the damage that you have by rebuilding and hopefully making it a little bit better. And then going on down that road too, whatever your insurance doesn't pay, and let's just say that the situation was big enough to where FEMA is involved, okay? Then you can talk with FEMA officials to, help you with that deductible in there. And then, of course, if you don't have insurance, it's going to be 50-50 on whether or not they can help you at all, along that line. This is why, people say insurance is expensive. Yes, it is in some cases, but you can shop around. I mean, there's insurance everywhere out there. You don't have to go with the big companies. There's a lot of smaller companies that are really good too. And people need to understand that. Take the time to shop. But anyway, insurance is a very important part of all that. And so through the recovery process, if you don't have insurance, you may not get back to that level you were at after the disaster if you don't have a means to rebuild.
So where do you, when you're watching the weather and things, where do you get your information from?
Well, weather-wise, from the National Weather Service. And I have to be very careful now what I say along this line. National Weather Service folks are the folks to pay close attention to. Like I was stating concerning our app, National Weather Service advisories and warnings and all the other items that we allow to come through our app come through in detail. Okay, so if you tap on the little red scroller thing on the app and then tap the information there, it expands and then you can read the whole information, whether it's an advisory, warning, or whatever. I'm not much into TV weather because I'm not into public panic. I'm into public safety. And the only reason these TVs would be on here in the room is for the video from the helicopters out there. That is gold, but sound is not allowed. I've kicked 2 people out of the group for turning up the sound. So I really mean that. We don't need the drama in this room. We got enough stuff going on, and we don't need all that going on. So we use the video because it's gold for our people out there. And then if we see stuff going on from some of the video and all, we'll advise the folks that are out there in that area so that they're paying a little bit closer attention or whatever. And especially at night, TV doesn't help us at night anyways. I've got, about 20 years of radar school, so to speak. I got to be recertified every 18 months. I do know what I'm looking at. If I have questions, we have a program where we have a direct link to the National Weather Service through a chat program, and I can talk back and forth, with a meteorologist if I have questions along that line. Then as reports and stuff come in, then we can, we give them the information, and some of our reports based on our spotters, telling us what's going on are the reason why sometimes severe thunderstorm warnings are issued and sometimes why possibly tornado warnings are issued.
Weather Center Wacomas?
I rely heavily on my spotters. If they told me Godzilla was walking across the back 40, I'd believe them. That's the rapport and the trust I have in our spotters. So, they're good people. They're good people. I want to take this time to explain to the folks too my reasoning on firing our storm sirens. Even on a test day, I have people that call and they're mad because I do a test. When we're under a warning of any kind, and just like for instance here a few weeks ago, we were under a tornado warning. People were upset because I didn't fire the sirens. The tornado threat was south of Wacomas. That's why I didn't fire the storm sirens here. There's been several instances over my career here that I haven't fired the storm sirens because I don't believe in panicking the city for a threat that's not here and it's not going to affect us. Now, people say, well, we had high winds along Norman Road. Well, there's been wind events that we've had that, came through the southern part of town, the central part, and the northern part, and everything in between wasn't touched. You can't see that. You can't see the wind like that. And it's all based on radar data. Radar beam above Enid is at about 1,300 feet. That's the bottom zone that the radar sees over Enid. Okay? And so everything from that point down, radar doesn't see. That's where we have our spotters out there. We had spotters out that night down there around the Wacomas area. They had some north, some south, and some east. And they weren't seeing anything. The type of storm front that this was what we call a QLCS system. It's a quasi-lineal convective system, okay? And those have the capability of producing tornadoes on the leading edge of the storm, not back behind it like it is with the normal supercell storms. And so therefore, and they don't have the same characteristics as a supercell storm. There's no wall cloud or anything. They just drop tornadoes down there occasionally. And so this is kind of a new thing for us from, I want to say it was somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago over in Tulsa. They had a tornado on the leading edge of a storm front. And there was no warning with it over there, and I think a few people got hurt. I don't think anybody got killed or anything, but that raised a boatload of questions. And so what they did is they started doing a very intense investigating, and what became from that was there's conditions that warrant these kind of conditions in the QLCS storms. But at the same time, what they did is they rewrote the program, and however they do the radar thing, the lower tilt, when they put the radar into the sales mode, it's SAIL, sales, I think it's sales 2 or 3 or whatever, maybe 1, 2, and 3. The lower scan of the radar updates every 60 to 90 seconds instead of 5 minutes.
So up here to Springfield.
Radar updates every 5 minutes in general, okay, in the precipitation mode. And when it's in the clear air mode, it's about every 10 to 15 minutes, you know, when nothing's going on. And so there's a lot of technical things that happen when we have these kind of storms, and this is where we really have to concentrate on what we're looking at, and especially when we have people in the field, and importantly, at night. It's very dangerous to have our people out there at night, even on a regular supercell type storm, because you can't see unless you have a lot of lightning. So, you know, I think if people understand where I'm coming from on that, I don't want to panic people unnecessarily. If our sirens go off during a storm, there's a threat out there. Take cover. And we'll do the best we can to get that information out to everybody. And for those people who like the drama, they can watch TV. They'll probably be on top of that too if there's not a lot going on down there. And then we just kind of move forward from there. When they rewrite a program for radar, you have to basically be retrained on what that information means, because what this meant last year may mean this year. And that's why the recertification classes, because there's a lot of new stuff that they do with the algorithms and stuff with that. And you got to keep in mind too, radar is a big piece of metal that goes around and around and around, okay? And it's run by a computer program. And if that computer program is not calibrated properly, the data you're looking at could be off. And that has happened in the past. You know, it's just, it happens sometimes. It's a computer, you know, with a machine. And so, again, this is where our spotters come into play. If the radar data is doing what we call range folding, which means all these little beams are going out and they're coming back erratically, and the data is purple, that's range folding, I have to rely very heavily on my spotters in the field to tell me what's going on. Back in, and don't quote me on the exact date, but it was back in 2006 or 7, somewhere in there, we had a boundary splitting Garfield County, you know, north to south, and it was just sitting there in the middle. We had 10 tornadic storms in the southern half of the county, and radar was just horrible that day. It was range folding horribly, and so what we had to do, I just turned off the screen because it wasn't doing us any good to look at the radar data. And so what I did is I made a general announcement over the radio to the guys and gals out there. And I said, radar is range folding really bad. I need to know where you are, what direction you're looking from, and what you're seeing. And so we got the big map out and we started plotting where they were. And that's what we did until these storms, you know, moved out of Garfield County. When it was over with, we took all this information and went to Norman. They went over it, and they had the same problem because we used the same programs, okay? And so, but a lot of the information that we were gathering, we were on the phone. I mean, we were on a hard line with them the whole time. And they issued warnings based on that information that our spotters, you know, gave it to us that day. But that's one of those extreme conditions where even radar data sometimes, it can't tell you what's really, you know, going on, and you have to rely on the people out there that you trust. So, you know, welcome to my world.
When you say range folding, can you elaborate more on that?
Radar puts out pulses every millisecond, you know, like that. It doesn't make that noise, but you know what I mean. The radar beams go out and they come back. And they have to come back in the same order they went out, so the data is clean. If this pulse and that pulse go out, but this one comes back before this one does, now radar's confused. It doesn't know how to read that data. Therefore, then the pixels on the computer, on the radar program, turn purple. And there's sometimes a lot of that in there, even in your base reflectivity imagery, your velocities can be that way too. And when that occurs, you're not sure what's going on there, other than you probably have a real strong inversion in the atmosphere, and it's causing a lot of that to happen. So it's kind of crazy, really, but just you learn these things over time. And back then, the range folding stuff was kind of new to me, because of the classes and stuff that we were taking and all. So when we saw this happening, I knew I needed to go to a higher level of smarts, basically, and that was to the folks down there in Norman, saying, hey, we're having this problem. They were too, and so we worked together to gather the right information and, get the warnings out to the people. People put a picture of a radar picture on their phone and say, well, this is what was going on in this area. Well, okay, what is that image from? Is that base reflectivity? Is it base velocity? Is it storm relative velocity? And at what level? There's like 24 tilts of radar. We don't get all of those, but I mean, which tilt was that? And where exactly? What height above the ground was this? You can look at a high tilt on radar and see circulation in the storm, say up in the mid or upper levels. Well, what's going on down low? Maybe nothing. It all means something. Some of the programs that we use, we can actually take a storm and do a crosslay of it and turn it up where we can see what's going on within the cell. It's really kind of neat. The TV stations, I think, do that a little bit, but we try to do that as much as we can so that we understand what's really going on within the cell and at what level that's going on. Because if you've got circulation in the mid and upper levels, that may, kind of intensify as it moves down. And so as it's moving down, we can warn our people in the field, hey, this storm is really rotating and it's winding up in the mid levels, and it's working its way down. Pay attention wherever they are, because this could produce possibly a tornado here within the next 15 minutes or so. A lot of parameters that you have to watch when we're doing this. Overall, I enjoy what I do. I really think it's a privilege to be able to be in this position and be in a position of trust with the county commissioners and with Gerald, the city manager. These are the people I answer to, and their trust in me to do the job and do it right. I've had several meetings with the city manager and with the county commissioners on what happens here and there and this kind of thing in the past. And we've worked through any kind of little problems and stuff that have come up, but nothing major has ever occurred that has gone wrong per se that we couldn't take care of in the event we ever had to. So good rapport with everybody, and that's the way it needs to be.